All right. So ONNX Edge working group meeting, December 4th. Present are myself, Milano Jaka, Ofer Rosenberg, Saurabh Tagri, Yedong Liu, and Manash. I'm going to stay with Manash. Okay. And so I sent. Let me share the screen actually first. All right. You see this? Yeah. So the agenda I sent over Gitter yesterday or Monday actually, and so main thing for me and actually for a lot of us is like to get readout from the workshop that happened like more than 2 weeks ago, and so either I think only Yedong and Manash were there from this audience, and so it would be really nice to see to get a little brief on proceedings of the workshop and how our working group session was perceived and what was the outcome, and etc. So I'm gonna give it then to either Yedong or Manash. I'm not sure who is gonna cover it. I think Yedong said he will. So Yedong, do you want to go ahead then?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do a brief recap of the workshop. So only two of our working groups are present here, me and Manash. So I think we will receive the email which contains the whole slides shortly from Microsoft. So maybe this email will come within days. So the
so
goal
is that you know, if you are saying we didn't receive it yet, but we should expect
not
to receive
yet,
it?
but we should, yes.
Okay.
Because yeah, every time they will send our the whole slides is in email. So actually the goals for this workshop is something like foster links between hardware vendors, developers, users, and Harry King, I remember from Intel, introduced the steering committee, the current situation of the steering committee, the roles of the elections, and the SIGs and working group chairs. And then we have some partner updates, update everyone on the current state of ONNX, how many developers we have, how many companies are joining, and how many operators we are having, or how many runtimes we have right now. And yeah, one thing, the foundations, yes, Linux Foundation AI, LFAI. So actually, we formed a working group called Foundation WG to do a survey, and then we voted to join the LFAI. There is a woman, I think she's called Jessica Kim. Jessica Kim, and she is the LFAI officer, the outreach committee chairperson, and she speaks on behalf of LFAI, and ONNX is part of the LFAI right now. So ONNX together with Acumus, I think, are the only two projects which were graduate projects under LFAI guide. So this is one thing, foundation and foundation working groups. Then I think both Microsoft and Intel did some presentations. One thing is the steering committee. So 5 steering committees, Microsoft, Intel, NVIDIA, Amazon, and Facebook. I think maybe 2 or 3 presented in China, Shanghai. Microsoft and Intel's are were definitely there. Amazon and Facebook were absent. I'm not sure whether NVIDIA presented or not. I think they might send some NVIDIA China a local guy to attend this work group. So
Okay.
and yeah, for Microsoft, they just do some basic updates, readouts about the working group. They introduce some uh, uh, their uh, their products or platforms which were using the or running on ONNX models, something like Azure ML, WinML, ML.NET, or and something like that. And for the Intel part, I think Harry introduced the working group and the SIG situations for Model Zoo, which is one of the 4 SIGs. Model Zoo is not established right now yet, and actually the ONNX committee is welcome if there is a volunteer or our company voluntarily to pick up this role as the Model Zoo leaders. And another one is quantization. Quantization is closed, and foundation working group is still alive, I think, even though we already voted to join the LFAI, even though the procedure
Foundation is a SIG, right? It's not working group.
I think it's a WG.
Foundation is WG?
I'm not sure.
No, it's a SIG.
Foundation
is a SIG.
All right, it's a SIG.
And there is no quantization working group. There was supposed to be, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it was a it's part of Foundation SIG right now.
Yes. So yes, I remember Intel introduced something about Azure ML plus Intel OpenVINO plus ONNX runtime. Actually, is a very interesting combination to do gesture recognition, and they introduced some of their products and OpenVINO based EP covering from cloud to edge, and ONNX runtime integrated with OpenVINO will be used in the verification of ONNX models. So display some speed ups by OpenVINOs, and that's about that's all about the steering committees. And
sorry, could you repeat integrated with what? OpenVINO. OpenVINO.
Yeah, Sarab, you should know that.
Yep, I know.
Yeah, OpenVINO. And there are also some interesting topics in some Chinese companies like JD. They deploy ONNX models on Android with ONNX runtime, and Tencent, which they deploy NCNN on mobile phones. And for working groups and the 6 updates, I remember a guy from Microsoft. He's called Ke Zhang, and he is in charge of the Infra 6. He spent about 10 minutes around the 6, which is pretty stable because all the basic things have already done. So it's just some random updates, and then we have some operators and converters, which is from Intel. A guy called Mihail, and did some updates from converters, and then actually Microsoft guys did pretty long presentations, updates about the training working group, which is still ongoing and pretty active about that. And they display some of their work on how to do this kind of training jobs and how to implement that. What's a mathematical way of sorting this out? And that's it. And for us, actually, the Edge working group update. And I and Manesh covered the slides that we discussed weeks ago. We like to hear some feedbacks from the community members. Actually, no direct feedbacks from the workshop audience. Presented the current situation.
I'm showing the slides that we were reviewing before.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying that Bill, we were saying seek guidance from steering committee. And did we get any guidance?
Not from the workshop, I think.
Okay.
So
By the way, how many people attended, like roughly?
I think most of them are from some Chinese companies, maybe around less than 100, I think, maybe 50 or 60.
I see, okay.
So yeah, that's basically all the things. So Manesh, do you have anything to add?
You covered most of that, most of the points. The only thing I wanted to bring up is that we did put up the question about the SIG taking on whether they will define a method for how ONNX models will be executed, which would then be used for any profile definition, if that is going to be a priority for the SIG. But there wasn't any feedback. We put the question on the table, but we didn't get any live feedback during the session.
That is for 2 foundation SIG?
Well, I think both were there, right? Like the old SIG as well as the LF Foundation members were there, but the LF Foundation I did not think was widely represented, at least in the first workshop. I think going forward, perhaps that might change.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from others? Sarah or Ofer? I have some echo here. Okay, no. Okay.
So just to summarize, we didn't actually get any feedback or guidance on what we presented.
Yes, correct.
No clear kind of at least direction or suggestions at least in the workshop. Okay, so what I want to, my second topic on agenda here was like, I wanted to basically to hear that, and then, we have been like, as stated in this progress report, really we were basically bit, circling for last 3 months, and no significant progress was made. And so, discuss the path forward, right? We were set to update statement of work that is still in progress, because because of all these discussions we had about static compliance to static profiles versus like the execution mode control and compliance to the execution mode, and that's still on table, right? I mean, this is still for us to discuss if we believe this is the way to go. One big question for me, as a chair, is like, given the kind of engagement even from the workshops and people and community other than us here, is there really real interest in the working of this working group or output of this working group? It is something that it's been going through my head for several weeks now, and I would like to hear others' opinions on this topic. We seem to have the disagreement in terms of how do we kind of define statement of work. and what it should be. I think that is, clear to everybody. And so what do we do about it? Do we continue, or do we think there is a value in continuing or not? I would like to kind of survey thoughts and opinions, because clearly we are not making big progress last 3 months.
Well, from interest perspective, Milan, go ahead, Manash.
Oh, yeah. From an ecosystem perspective, I believe that there is value in the working group to go ahead and define the set of parameters required to execute ONNX models across different hardware platforms. The fragmentation in the ecosystem is going to create challenges in terms of how consistent the ONNX model execution is going to be. So there is a problem. And if the statement of work goes out and addresses, tries to solve that, that would be value add.
To address what? The fragmentation in the ecosystem and challenges of planning?
To address the you cannot control the fragmentation in the ecosystem. Hardware will evolve the way hardware evolves. But the specification could define how ONNX models need to be executed, because the ONNX spec understands the value of an operator or the need for how a model needs to be executed. Maybe it's that there are performance boundaries, maybe there are accuracy boundaries, quantization, all of that, right? So if the spec and ONNX can define how a model has a preferred path of execution, that would put the responsibility on the hardware to ensure that it can meet that. And
so, Manash, I agree with you that there is a need, but to kind of echo some of the concern that Milan presented, I think that the lack of involvement of other ONNX members, as well as the lack of interest that which is what we observe, like even in the workshop, it kind of raises to me some doubt that the work that we can do can be meaningful, because we don't have the wide representation of hardware vendors to kind of get consensus of that we are targeting the right things. We can define stuff, and then we can have other ONNX members coming and saying, this is actually not the thing that she should have defined. And that would happen after many months of work. So I'm concerned from the lack of involvement of other ONNX members. And there were multiple attempts throughout the 3 last workshops to increase the number of members. And I didn't see too many hardware vendors addressing it.
So are you suggesting then that we should pause and wait for this problem to become really urgent, and then understand, who are the participants or who would be impacted by it, and then take this up?
That is one way to think about it. Or, I'm not sure what pausing means. If we pause for, without activity for a couple of months, by rules of regulations or whatever it's called, governance rules, right? It automatically working group is kind of disband. In the sense, like, if there's no activity, then it becomes like canceled, right? So if we pause for more than 3 months, that will automatically mean you know, breakage or working group would be disbarred, basically. I don't know what is the proper term. It would be, stopped. And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, that is a way that to think about it. Is it like, okay, so if we are trying to impose and ways to kind of specify to the hardware that how models should be executed and what is the expectation on execution, without wider hardware vendor participation, it's hard to kind of say, oh, this is the way to go. I mean, we don't know who is gonna technically barf on this going forward, right? Yeah, I mean, that's option is that we wait and see if this is really something that is of relevance. I heard just that that open Vino will be used as a framework to validate ONNX operators, right? Is that what we are?
ONNX Model Zoo.
Or the ONNX Model Zoo, right?
Yeah.
Which Model Zoo is, I mean, there, but Model Zoo working group was in making, right? Or something.
The Model Zoo Singh, actually.
Oh, Model Zoo Singh. Okay. 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 So if really there is interest in how do we define and what is the hardware vendor compliance to the given models. I mean, do we need proper? Do we need given lack of interest? Do we need to just say, okay, well, listen, this is not really something that anybody cares much about it at this point. But I would like to hear others. I mean, Yadong, Saurabh. What are your thoughts from this perspective?
I think, Milan, I would say that I would echo what Manash said. It's a very important problem. I don't know what to say about other companies, but I would say it's very important for success of ONNX to, all participants to come and address some of these issues that we have around Edge. Yes, it's not an easy problem. We have difference in perspectives where we're coming from. We're trying to resolve ambiguity in our definitions. By no means it's an easy problem to tackle.
Okay.
But it's an important problem. I think sooner or later we'll have to deal with it.
So important in the context of compliance in general. I mean, what we are talking about now is not even Edge anymore. That's the point. It is beyond Edge, in my opinion. It's just general way to qualify hardware, basically. Nothing to do with Edge, really.
I don't think we want to say that this is a hardware qualification program or a hardware qualification working group. I would say that what is missing is as a hardware vendor or as a hardware specific inference engine, if there is no guidance on how to allocate or prioritize ops across the different compute blocks, and the hardware inference engine may choose to ignore that guideline, but having one would be useful because in the absence of that, we are getting inconsistent, execution, and therefore the end result is inconsistent. I mean, MLPerf is trying to standardize how hardware itself performs across standard models, But in the real world, it is not going to be about benchmarking or getting the, showcasing a hardware's value. It will be about how you can maximize the power and compute on that endpoint to execute the specific model that you have. So I know I'm saying a lot, but there are two things here. One is from a hardware perspective, vendor's perspective, perhaps it is all about benchmarking and showcasing the power of the hardware. That is covered by MLPerf. But from a developer's perspective, if I have an ONNX model and I want to allocate it or execute it across this universe of edge hardware, the model should be able to give some guidance on what kind of compute or compute priorities it should be used with.
I don't, okay, I get that, but my point is this is nothing to do with edge. This is general, how you could do it for the cloud device. You could say
the cloud is not that big a problem because the ecosystem in cloud is relatively controllable. The cloud is all about data center hardware, which gets qualified and assorted through a process. So there already exists some boundaries on what a cloud-based chip or an inference engine can and cannot do. On the edge is where we really don't know what hardware is going to get deployed where.
I get that, but the thing is like that means to control execution, prioritize execution, and either through the metadata in the model or through the whatever API. This is generic. There's nothing to do. That's what I'm saying. It's general framework to prioritize what you call it execution. So in that sense, it's like beyond edge, right? Do we agree on that? It's beyond edge because it's really generic request for model execution prioritization basically, and giving hints to hardware, and and I get the point that edge is more important from that perspective, but or it's more relevant to the edge, but as a concept, it's generic.
I agree with you. As a concept, it is generic.
Yeah, and so one of the, so maybe let's walk down the memory lane a little bit. So one of the kind of desires for the edge working group is to say, okay, for the edge devices, to be able to say, or to edge vendors to be able to say, okay, I can run this profile, and profile is to be combination of several things, and attributes and set of operators. So basically, I think that is maybe one thing that was missed in over time, that it's by categorizing profiles to the specific set of operators, you could say, okay, I can do this subset, and therefore I can do this type of models, right? And maybe that is the core of the whole thing, to say that the vendor can say, I can do these use cases technically, right? And so we were circling of trying to define these profiles to say, now we introduce attributes like execution performance and speed and all that stuff, power and etc., accuracy, which are relevant topics, but perhaps this is where it got trickier to kind of define the profiles if you have all these attributes. And so maybe the key aspect of this compliance is to say, really, what is the set of models or set of operators that the given profile or given hardware can do. Now, if you say just that, then technically you know, anybody who is supporting ONNX, you know, there is a model zoo, and they can say, yeah, we can run these models in the model zoo. Therefore, operators that are part of this model zoo or these models, technically we support, right? The aspect of benchmarking and all that, like how accurate and all that is perhaps secondary. From the perspective of somebody who wants to use a certain solution, they would like to know first, can I do the model? Can I do operators on a given platform? Yes, check. And then they can benchmark. And providing benchmarking numbers could come from the vendor itself. They could say, well, this is what we can achieve for these models and so on. And perhaps this is part of the whole model zoo working group or SIG that is, you know, can say that, you know, vendors should advertise which models from model zoo they can do and with what accuracy. So it's kind of benchmarking aspect of it. We don't want to get into benchmarking, right? Technically, but you know, and so if you put this bounds like that, then it becomes like maybe the problem statements shifts a little bit. You know, in the context of really going back to the, you know, maybe I'm trying to decode why is the lack of interest in what you're doing, right? And from the general hardware vendors, they don't care apparently, right? Either we don't advertise enough, or we did bring it up in workshops, but so far with little kind of, you know, engagement level. And so that tells me like really nobody is like really super excited about this. Now, the context that was brought up recently through the discussions about prioritization and how do you prioritize or control execution is different. That is something that we as a group could say, okay, this is not part of this group. This is technically important, but it's a general concept. Give notice to Foundation SIG and say, this is, we think is important, and please consider it, right? And apparently you did bring it up in a workshop, but we didn't, I guess, get any immediate feedback on that front either. And so when I circle all this, it's just like, okay, what is the purpose of this group, right? And that's the question that I am posing. Like, what is the path forward? Do we continue? Do we pause? Do we decide to say, okay?
So, Manash, last time you mentioned that we can pose the steering committee to give us some indication on how to describe execution and all that. Yes, they didn't answer it at the workshop, but do we have a line of sight? Like, you know, maybe they need more time and more data to ponder on, and do we need to formally approach them in another way to get a formal answer from them? Or do you think just they're not interested?
I got the sense that we will need to formally approach them because the workshop session and the pace at which we went through topics, this may not have had the time to go debate and deliberate over. So I actually would think that if there is another forum where we could approach, so that this can be debated and then decided that, okay, yeah, it makes sense that we pause on this working group and take up the matter elsewhere, that can be a valid decision then. I think this group, although, you know, we don't have more than 3 hardware vendors here, there is definitely representation, but there are more hardware partners that we should bring in. That may be the question that we give the steering committee.
Actually, when I was listening to what you and Milan said, I was thinking that maybe since we were trying to come, when we created the working group, we came from a point of view of a hardware vendor that thinks about interoperability, but maybe this is the wrong perspective. Maybe the perspective has to come from the users of the hardware, from the frameworks. So maybe the companies that need to drive the working group or the requirements and everything into what need to be set and defined inside the edge are actually the companies that are going to use the hardware. And this is Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, whoever other company that is interested and does have the problem of working with different hardware vendors. Maybe this is the companies that we need for them to come together and present the problem from their point of view, present the characteristics or attributes or vectors, whatever we call them, that they see as differentiating between different hardware vendors. And then we, the hardware vendors, can come in and say, well, that makes sense, and sure, no problem, we can somehow formalize our hardware to describe these characteristics. But I think that maybe we approached it incorrectly by trying to define something when we have the wrong point of view, and the right point of view is actually of the users of the hardware.
Okay, interesting. I mean, it's okay. I get kind of reasoning. Okay. So okay. Let me see. So how about somebody or I, or we decide and maybe we review, but we draft the letter to the steering committee with exactly saying that we are at the point where we are doubting the need for this working group, and here's the kind of why, and really directly approach steering committee at this point without waiting for them to come to us, even though we are bringing it up to workshop and all that. But so basically, just have a maybe dedicated approach and suggest and propose what we, basically things that we discussed in this meeting, and then seek the resolution that way. Would that be something that the way we go about it?
Let's do that. Let's bring it up to the steering committee.
Okay. Okay. So so let's okay, I'll take it myself to draft the email or letter or something, or the email, which I would then share with you guys for feedback, and get in the next meeting, and then we go from there. Is that okay?
Okay. Yep.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for the input. I don't have anything other on agenda for today. If we don't have any other topics to discuss, then we can finish the meeting. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Talk to you then next meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll send the meeting notes and recording and all that stuff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.